this is such a fun part of the process, Game Changers. This is where we go from a question or a problem into coming up with a solution. It's called ideation. Brian, I'm pretty sure that's a made-up word by designers like you. Did you make up the word ideation?
If it's made up, I probably had something to do with it.
I love it. It's one of those things though that we love because we can say ideation rules apply, and we'll give you those rules in just a moment. But what you need to focus on as your mantra, Game Changers, is this. First idea, worst idea. What you're trying to do here is come up with all sorts of solutions from all sorts of frames of reference or different perspectives here. So for example, when Brian and I are in studio and we are coming up with lots and lots of ideas for a tricky problem, we will say we're not leaving here until we get to 100 ideas. There's all sorts of rules here. It's a little bit like brainstorming, but it's actually more of a process. So you can learn this one and use it over and over and over again, not just when you're doing design thinking. But of course, like every stage in the design thinking process, there are times when we've got some examples of people who get it really, really right and who don't get it right at all. Brian, I know you've got some really good examples of when designers have tried to ideate and they've really nailed it, or they haven't at all.
I do. I have some great examples where we've ideated successfully and ideated not so successfully. Now, this first one should bring a smile to your face because it's all about toothpaste. There was a gentleman called Gary Fraser who was put in charge of the toothpaste division of a big company called Unilever. Now, they make loads of things that you find in your kitchen and your bathroom, but toothpaste wasn't one of the things they did well. So they went, Gary, make us some toothpaste and make it big. Take on all of the big toothpaste boys. That was a great challenge for Gary. However, they didn't give him that much money, so that created a problem. So that meant Gary had to innovate, and by innovate, he had to fail forward. How did he fail forward? Well, he looked at every aspect. He looked at the pricing, the packaging, the advertising, the product mix, and he came up with a really innovative solution. It was a toothpaste called Mentadent, and it was the first toothpaste in the market to bring together peroxide and baking soda. And this brand created a whole new category, which he went out and they went out and owned because nobody'd ever innovated there before. That's how you do it. That's how you fail forward. That's how you win. Go, Gary.
I love how excited you are about that, Brian, and you were right, it did bring a big smile to my face. But I do know as well that there are times when ideation has failed. Can you give me an example?
Yes, I can, Summer. I can give you a great example about a brand which didn't innovate well, and unfortunately, it ended up nearly dying. Now, back in the day when we were youngsters, not only did we have these things in our ears where we go around listening to music, there used to be these things called cameras, which actually took a photograph. You didn't need your phone, you had to go out and buy another product and you use this to take photos, and believe it or not, they didn't appear in the camera. You had to take them in to a chemist or some such place and get things called photos developed. Now, back in that day, there was one big corporation called Kodak, and they were the biggest company in the world when it came to developing photo film. And they sat there and they watched the changes in digital technology, and they refused to adapt. They refused to innovate. They tinkered around the edges with new ways of making analog film and analog cameras without realizing that digital changed everything. And nobody needs photos, nobody needs film. We have a phone to do it now. So there's an example where by not ideating, you die. No innovation, no future, no more photos.
Whoa, that is huge, Brian. This whole idea of if we don't ideate, we're going to fail anyway. So we might as well have a little bit of fun with it. So I'm going to give you a couple of rules of what it's like to ideate and to do this successfully. Rule 1, you want your ideas to be silly and crazy. In fact, you want to be able to say, could this be the weirdest idea I've ever come up with? Those things where you want to put pen to paper and say, oh no, I won't because it's too silly or crazy, get it down on a post-it note. So silly and crazy, we're after wild and wacky ideas here. Our second rule, bounce and build. It's kind of fun to come up with ideas on your own, but I can tell you it's a lot more fun when you do that with friends. So Brian and I will always bounce off the ideas of others, and we will say things like yes and. Brian will come up with an idea and then I will build upon that idea with him. So it's actually a really nice collaborative teamwork process. The more brains that you can get into ideation, I can almost promise you, the better ideas you're going to have. So that's rule 2. And rule 3 is welcome and willful. You want to make sure that all ideas are welcome. So I want you to park things like your squishy face. When someone says something and you're like, ooh, that'll never work, cut that out. Also, we don't want to hear language like, nah, that won't work. The minute you do that, when you're in a team, somebody is definitely going to have the next best idea, but they're not going to give it to you because you haven't made their ideas welcome and you haven't been willful in accepting it. So that is our 3rd rule of ideation. Brian, you and I are going to test this out. You are going to need lots of post-it notes here, so I'm going to send some to you.
Got them?
All right, now all we need is a pen, a stack of post-it notes, and we come up with putting our problem at the core, and then we just let wild here. All right, Brian, here's our challenge. How might we make school more fun? I'll start. We could give everybody a horse to ride to school.
We could, and we could make that horse into a unicorn during break times.
Yes, and we could actually use break times in order to get lots and lots of animals at school, and rather than us just all sitting around, we might have a chook farm, which would be really great.
That's right. And instead of teaching children boring things like learning Spanish or French, we could teach them the international languages of chickens and goats and all the other animals we bring into our menagerie.
Yes, and we might be able to bring in other people around our community who are really professional at looking after animals or maybe even Spanish-speaking chickens. And we could invite them in and we could sell the eggs, and the money from the eggs of the chooks could go towards kids going on school excursions.
And not only will we turn our school into a functioning farm, we could also use all of these animals in the evenings and weekends to do a circus.
Yes, and we could sell tickets to the circus where all of the students play a part, and then we could actually have a specialist circus school, and it would mean that more kids would come to school every day. So Brian, I'm going to stop us there. What we can see is, just from coming up with a really clear how might we question, and then having some really clever brains on that, we actually have those aha moments. Honestly, most of those ideas won't even make the mix. But we need to come up with a quantity of those ideas so that maybe we'll squish together idea 1, 5, 7, and 103, and that's where we might actually have our aha, I think we've cracked the code moment. So your brief here is quite simple. You need to come up with lots of ideas. Use all of the canvases that you have there to help you along the way.